like to thank specifically Professor Alam for his excellent effort in getting us here and always following up with us to prepare and submit our presentation. I just want very quickly to give you a background on what I have done in relation to sustainable development. It's a journey that started in 1991, and then I fell in love with the subject itself, and because I found it's something that really everyone needs, such a new thinking. So I realized it's a new thinking. It's a transformation of the mind. It is a transformation of the thinking, a transformation of the way we look into the world, from whatever level of mentality or education we are. The subject which I am going to talk about is really a very, very important subject. And this is to do with the cities we live in, and what we should do and what have been done in relation to the cities and their development. Obviously, I cannot cover this very, very complicated issue in half an hour, but I will do my best just to convey the message. I have about 46 years of professional experience, which taught me a lot. I have visited some 55 countries, and originally I am a highway engineer, and then I moved to highway planning, and then I moved to city planning, and since 1991 I kept my updating my profession, and since 1991 I have been deeply involved in sustainable development. I have been to Istanbul for the Habitat 2 conference. I have been to Johannesburg in 2002. Recently I have been to the 24th session of the Governing Council of the UN Habitat. I have participated in some 120 conferences, seminars and workshops in this respect. Very quickly I will present a background and just go quickly on the journey of United Nations Habitat conferences and the evolution of Habitat agenda. I'm sure most of you are aware of that. The Habitat implementation and the preparation of for Habitat 3, conclusions and recommendations. I think we start with this histogram because this is where the problem is, in fact. And some countries, they are suffering from loss of populations, but developing countries really continue to have increase in population, and this is where problems come from. Since we talk about human settlements, just roughly we have at least 455 cities with 1 million plus, some 1,054 cities with 500, half a million plus, and some 2,851 cities with 150,000 population plus. The reason why I'm mentioning these figures is when we look into what actions and what reach out we have, we always see projects or experiments with 100 cities, 50 cities, and so on and so forth. So the scale we are talking about is so huge. Again, we have to look always into the balance between the effort, if it is commensurate with the challenge. I have to state that it's worrying to note that the concentration of poverty, homelessness, and slums is increasingly associated with the growth of the world's urban population. And this, most of you realize that wherever you go, it's the situation. Even in developed countries. I live in the USA, I live in New Jersey, and I remember seeing scenes in New York City back in the 1990s. Really, it's something very alarming. As far as Habitat 2 conference, which was called and still being called the City Summit, produced the Habitat Agenda, which has 241 paragraphs. It is the global strategy for sustainable urban and city development, and the Istanbul Declaration on Human Settlements, which has 15 articles. It's all contained in this publication. If I may ask, how many of you, I am sure most of you are, have read Habitat Agenda? Okay, thank you. This is the sort of structure of the Istanbul Declaration on Human Settlements. We have issues related to sustainable human settlements. We have issues to do with, that's half of the document deals with the shelter. We have issues to do with good urban governance, enablement and participation. We have issues to do with gender equality, assessing progress, international cooperation, financing shelter and human settlements. And this is only the 15 articles. This is a very thorough and elaborate sort of document telling us what are the problems and what are the actions needed in general. So every city could tailor-make, the action in relation to their local conditions and assisted by what is in this global plan. As far as the global plan itself, as I said, 241 articles, it is so detailed that it is very helpful to any country, developing and developed. But the question, this is the whole issue of the core issue of what I am talking about. We would like to know how many cities throughout the world who are aware of Habitat Agenda. The answer is unknown. You spend time to try to find how many cities. So this is something which I would like you to have it in the background. Habitat 2 conference produced the Habitat Agenda, the global strategy. As I said, I'm sorry, that's okay. In the Istanbul Declaration, we are, means the heads of the countries saying that, and the official delegations of countries assembled at the United Nations Conference on Human Settlements in Istanbul, commit ourselves to objectives, principles, and recommendations contained in the Habitat Agenda and pledge our mutual support for its implementation. And this is something really a very, very important sort of pledge. Habitat Agenda was quite comprehensive, but difficult to read. This is an assessment of a meeting by the ESCAP, the Economic Commission for Southeast Asia of the United Nations. The agenda is a document drafted and approved by governments and is not yet a people's agenda. That's what they said, which I disagree to an extent. Many urban actors, such as local government, civil society organizations, and local communities, which according to the agenda should play a key role in its implementation, are not yet aware of it. And that's really the whole issue. Are not yet aware of it. And this is really something which continues to be the case while even I talk, unfortunately. Habitat 2 concluded that the achievements of sustainable human settlements and the provision of adequate shelter and basic services for all require partnerships. And that was one of the key issues. And it has not been fulfilled yet, as expected. Require partnerships among countries and among all actors within countries, including public, private, voluntary, and community-based organizations, the cooperative sector, non-governmental organizations, and individuals. Partnerships can help to pool resources, share knowledge, contribute skills, and capitalization on the comparative advantage of collective work. So in here, I moved to the journey of the Habitat conferences. It started back in 1972 and went through Vancouver. That was the first conference on human settlements in 1976. And the second conference was in between the two conferences. There were a lot of UN General Assemblies, resolution, and so on and so forth. The journey ended, is not ended, but the last action was the formation of an international committee formed by the Secretary General of the United Nations, headed by John Close, the Executive Director of UN Habitat, and it had its first meeting, and the second meeting is going to be this September. So in a couple of days, I think in the second week of, to decide on which city will host Habitat 3 conference in 2016. The journey of implementation of the World Summit on Sustainable Development, the Sustainable Development of Africa. That was really a very, very important and historical sort of document as well. Support African countries in their effort to implement the Habitat Agenda and the Istanbul Declaration through initiatives to strengthen national and local institutional capacities in the area of sustainable urbanization and human settlements, provide support for adequate shelter and basic services, and the development of efficient and effective governance systems in cities and other human settlements. So we can see even in 2002, Habitat Agenda was alive at the international level. Unfortunately, it did not reach, the cities. The reason why it did not reach the cities, there is a very, very visible sort of relation. It's the political relation within countries as well as the relation between the country and UN Habitat. So most of the countries who participate in the UN Habitat conferences come from the Ministry of Housing. So when those guys, they come back from the conferences, they do not disseminate, what they have gained. So you see there is like a gap. And I realized this when I organized a conference for Islamic cities to see the implementation of Habitat Agenda in Islamic cities, which was held in Tunisia in year 2000. And I met some ministers trying to promote for the conference. And 4 years after Istanbul, I was told that we have not even, after 4 years, we have not received the Habitat Agenda, as a ministry, because it deals with cities. It's the Ministry of Municipalities in one of the countries. I don't want to mention the country. And that was the case with others. So when we invited 146 cities into Tunisia, and we sent them in advance a questionnaire to know who is aware of Habitat Agenda. Out of these 146 capitals, none was aware of Habitat Agenda. So this is really something worthy of consideration. Now we have the future we want, that the outcome of Rio, which we will come to it very soon. But again, why I'm showing this here as part of the journey, because it does mention habitat agenda. So habitat agenda still, until now, not in 2016, because it seems that there is an intention to come up with a new urban agenda. And this is something which really of concern. Just recently, the 24th session of the Governing Council of the United Nations on the Human Settlement Program, there is a draft resolution on inputs for and support to the preparatory process of the United Nations Conference on Housing and Sustainable Urban Development, preparing for Habitat 3. And it says, while significant progress has been made in implementing the Istanbul Declaration on Human Settlements and the twin goals of the Habitat Agenda, the challenges remain, such as, among others, the continuing increase of slum dwellers in the world, the negative impact of environmental degradation, including climate change, desertification, and loss of biodiversity on human settlements, and the need to reduce disaster risk and build resilience to disasters in urban settlements. So the problems are still there, but the problem is we don't know the scale, the magnitude of what we are facing. And that's really a big problem. I would request you kindly to consider this from the humanitarian point of view. Where are we going? Recognizing also the need for a review and assessment at the national, regional, and international levels of the progress made towards the attainment of the goals of Habitat Agenda goals, principles and commitments, and the global plan of action, that's the Habitat Agenda, and of other international goals relevant to human settlements as a basis for the formulation of a new urban agenda. And this is really where I am very much concerned, because I don't think we have achieved much yet in relation to this document. The Habitat implementation, there were relevant solutions of the General Assembly on the implementation of the outcome of the United Nations Conference on Human Settlements. Literature is full with these resolutions. When we look into the commitments, as I said, pledging mutual support for the implementation, and there are relevant decisions and resolutions of the Economic and Social Council. Significant progress has been made in implementing the Istanbul Declaration, but this significant progress is very limited, unfortunately. Again, the UN Habitat, mandated by the General Assembly, they established what they call the urban observatories. So a number of countries, not all developing countries, have already established urban observatories. Some countries like Saudi Arabia, they have almost an urban observatory in every main city. Unfortunately, in UAE, we don't have one yet. Many others, other countries, cities, they don't have one yet. The implementation of Habitat Agenda, again, I can state with confidence that there were efforts, but the efforts were limited. Governments, for example, have the primary responsibility for implementing the Habitat Agenda. That was stated clearly in the document. Governments are as enabling partners, but when we check and see what governments have done, in fact, relatively have done very little in this respect. Governments as enabling partners should create and strengthen effective partnership with women, youth, and the elderly, persons with disabilities, vulnerable and disadvantaged, groups, indigenous people and communities, local authorities, the private sector, and non-governmental organizations in each country. And this is an article related to the within this government in relation to how should we implement Habitat Agenda. One comment of the European Union back in 2001, it says the Habitat Agenda cannot be fully implemented without an inclusive cooperation between all habitat partners. So at the level of European Union, you can see there was a problem. And they continue the cooperation between governments, non-governmental organizations, and the representatives from local authorities and the private sector is of particular importance in order to promote a participatory citizenship. In here, really, there is a statement issued by the Department for International Development in the UK, saying that national governments are at the forefront of strategies to address the urban challenge. And it says here, UNCHS Habitat has not, until recently, I'm just quoting, been able to provide the leadership and vision that the Habitat Agenda required. And we can just imagine, if this is the case with the agency that is mandated to promote Habitat Agenda, so what is the consequences on the other side? Part of the journey of Habitat Agenda is to go to Habitat 3 conference. And the Habitat 3 conference have objectives to secure renewed political commitment for sustainable urban development, assess accomplishments to date, address poverty, and identify and addressing new and emerging challenges. And if we go into details, these challenges, the emerging challenges, I think most of them are related to mainly to the climate change. And the climate change comes usually under the environmental issues, which is already stated here. So I see no reason why we should invent or prepare a new urban agenda because of emerging things that are already implicitly available here. Also, the Habitat 3 conference is expected to result in a concise, focused, forward-looking, and action-oriented outcome document, new urban agenda. I myself, I couldn't see anything which is, not clear in this document, which I have been living with for the last, God knows, since 1996. A new urban agenda is supposed to reinvigorate the global commitment to and support for housing and sustainable urban development. There is a manifesto for cities, you could look at it, and this is really orchestrated and taken by something called the Global Campaign for Urban Agenda, which they are preparing for the last 18 to 20 months for Habitat 3. We call for strong partnership, Habitat Agenda partners, to craft and implement a global urban agenda. By the way, I participated in one of their meetings just recently in April in Nairobi. And I just wanted to see, because I saw Habitat Agenda partners, so I said, wonderful. So now we are talking about Habitat Agenda. So when I was there, Habitat Agenda was not on the agenda of the meeting. And when I asked, they said, no, we are talking something else. So this is really very, very interesting. I had to leave because, I came particularly to see what is being done and what is the situation, the position in relation to Habitat Agenda. I have to jump now, if you don't mind. Okay. The conclusion, I think Habitat Agenda is an outcome of the world's community to achieve sustainable development for the human settlements across the globe. It is 13 years old now. The whole world was so enthusiastic about Habitat Agenda that enthusiasm unfortunately has faded away. Habitat Agenda is a well-drafted document being the global plan for sustainable urban development, and it set the conditions for its implementation success in a clear and elaborative way. Global, regional, national and local efforts exerted during the last 17 years were and are not commensurate with the initial enthusiasm. As of now, knowledge about the number of cities and towns aware of Habitat Agenda is unknown and or not available for the public or researchers. A decent number of cities and towns all over the world are not aware of Habitat Agenda. Lack of effective reach out to and communications with the Habitat Agenda real beneficiaries, as well as the lack of financial support were and are among the main causes for the limited Habitat Agenda implementation success. Urban observations, in addition to other efforts, were established jointly by UN Habitat and governments in a number of cities throughout the world to monitor implementation of Habitat Agenda. These efforts are not adequate. There is enough evidence showing that the implementation of Habitat Agenda of 1996 is inadequate, limited, and not fully in line with the requirements set for its success. In 2016, the world will witness the holding of the UN Habitat 3 conference that is expected to produce a new global urban agenda. As far as the mishaps, in order to avoid the mishaps that have encountered the implementation of Habitat Agenda, it is rather crucial that the world's communities dedicated to Habitat Agenda take action that would contribute to a sound outcome of the Habitat 3 conference. As far as recommendations, within the remaining periods of Habitat 3 conference in 2016, efforts by all those stakeholders seriously concerned about Habitat Agenda have to be undertaken to spread and build knowledge about Habitat Agenda for those cities that are still unaware of it throughout the world. A global assessment of the Habitat Agenda implementation, including partnerships established since 1996, because we don't have that information yet. Reach out programs, means of implementation used, and the number of cities throughout the world aware of Habitat Agenda has to be undertaken by neutral scientific establishments. The assessment's results should feed in the ongoing global urban campaign. Habitat Agenda stakeholders have to intensify their presence and make their voice heard at the World Urban Forum 7 to be held in Medellin, Colombia next year, 2014. Utilizing the remaining time until Habitat 3 conference, there is an urgent need to promote effective partnerships, communications, and reach out programs for the implementation of Habitat Agenda, even at pilot levels. Thank you.